Hello, welcome to another episode of Making the Rounds. We had to delay slightly so that I could clean the wax out of my ears. You think I'm joking, but you're not. It's not. It's not a joke. I am here as always with Emily Rand. I realize the live viewership today might be a little down since LEC is going on, but I think the TLDR is that 14.2 happened on LCS, so LCS is better.
It did.
What else we do want to talk about is we want to ask Emily how her first cast of 2024 went. In all of its excellent detail, she could self-reflect, and then every time she says something negative, the frog will pop up on the screen. Not in the live VOD, but in the
in the
VOD.
YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just gonna get frogged a billion times. I mean, obviously, I've casted. Also, I should preface this by saying I am sick. No, it is not COVID. And that's why I sound terrible. And also why I'm like propping my head up on my chin a lot, probably. This is the first time I've casted with the intent of becoming a color caster. Previously, it was always kind of I am on a co-stream, which is a lot different, or I am coming on to the LCS cast with the intent that it's going to be more of a co-streamy, like loose vibe, and coming on with the framework of like, oh, I want to improve. This is something that I actually do want to do is very different. Overall, in comparison to my other two casts, I actually thought it was my best of the three because already I was just a little bit more comfortable with talking. The worst part about it was there is a time because of the Kelsey, you know about this, right? The HUD like issues with Drake timers.
Yep.
I looked at the wrong thing for Drake timer, so I like fucked it up completely. And that's gonna happen, but I should have looked at the minimap. And then I got in my own head about that mistake. So I think like if you at all know me as a person, which Kelsey does, I feel like it's not that hard to discern what my personality is like from how I appear on LCS. Pretty similar, a little bit more high energy. That's about it. Obviously, I beat myself up a lot for mistakes. So once I realized, because I realized in the middle of the cast, I got that Drake timer wrong, like fuck. And then I was really quiet for a time. That's something that I need to fix. And the other things I need to fix are just a lot of minutia and like memorization of things. So I can basically like, I just need to get to the point where I have certain, especially like items and names, like ability names and details memorized to the point where when I am looking at it, I'm not saying QWER or assuming that someone will know what I'm talking about and being able to say that succinctly, which is just repetition. And like I'll probably make flashcards or something because I find that even though they're analog and old, they work for my brain. So writing stuff down helps me memorize things. And yeah, but like all in all, I had a great time. I thought Flowers and Azale are just like, I mean, I have only ever done TriCast with Flowers and Azale and Flowers and Kobe, and every single one of them is just like absolute pro. So like even if I fuck up completely, they'll be able to carry it. Not that I'm saying that's how I felt like it went, because I had a really good time outside of fucking up that Drake timer. But yeah, that's kind of how it went. Like I felt like it's a good building block. I have a really good list of stuff to work on. And I'm going to be meeting with some people later this week on how to continue to improve that, because I do want to get to the point where I'd be able to enter and be the solo color caster and not be so nervous that like, you know, I would do something like that and it would completely ruin a cast. So
you're gonna get frogged so hard. Anyway,
oh god.
I mean,
legitimate criticism, sorry.
It's great because I think I saw your first ever cast, which was you casting CB LOL right?
It
over
was
over a Twitch
shut
stream
down.
with
Yeah.
with Chris Quaco. Shout out to
Yep.
Chris Quaco. Good times. So from the lengths that you've come from getting shut down because people don't want to hear you. No, that's not why she was shut down. But anyway, to
Just keep it like that. Leave that the reason. We were so bad. No,
no,
that's
we do not
not
want
why,
this
actually.
associated with our product. To now being basically able to cast on the LCS stage with staples of the scene, who everyone loves, and then people saying, no, 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 Emily, please cast more, So that's actually amazing. And I'm so excited for you as you start to do more on air casting. And obviously items are really hard. For those of you who don't know, I haven't named that item redemption point in my chat where you can tell me to name literally any item either on screen or not. A lot of times I don't know it because I'm terrible at names of things.
I
So remembering things on the fly is really
like
hard.
I have another thing that tilts me, and maybe this is just because my vision sucks ass. There's so many items that if you're just glancing over them, like en route to another point, and you're just trying to see what items they have, they look exactly alike if you're just like scanning your eyes across it. Because for me, all I'll see is like the colors. So the other week, I think it was just last week when Insanity went Zach mid, and Raz and I are just sitting in the back, like chatting, and I glance over the items. Again, I'm looking at something else in the game, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Insanity built Crypt Bloom. He did not build Crypt Bloom. He built Hollowed Radiance. Hollowed Radiance. But like it's if you're just skimming, at least for me and my terrible vision, if I'm just skimming across, all I see is like purple and like a greeny blue kind of color with some like white around certain things and to make it stand out. And obviously, if I had to compare now, Crypt Bloom has less purple and a slightly greener green, but like, yeah, I need to just memorize a lot of that stuff because like, man, so many of the items look exactly the same to me. Even in game, like when I'm playing the game, they still look very similar. So,
well, we will. I'm sure you'll have your glow up. So we're gonna go forward. We did have 14.2 impact on the LCS, and specifically, what I want to talk about is whether or not we actually felt the impact of playing on live patch, for like the players and the teams in the studio and when we're watching the game. So we feel like, yes, live patch, so many new cool things, or not.
really, like I think it's gonna depend on patch. Obviously, the big things off of this patch are, in my opinion, Karma Ezreal, and then a few other champions, namely TF, which we did see a couple bans thrown at TF due to some changes in his kit that allow you to build AD. And yeah, I think it is. I actually asked my 3 interviewees about this in the new episode of Pros that came out. But I think pros generally are slower to adapt, and I also think the patch itself doesn't have a lot of major changes from the previous one. And on top of that, because of the truncated, like essentially no preseason thing, I still think teams are trying to figure out how to play the game as it is right now. Weirdly, I don't know if this is going to open a can of worms, but like fundamentally, the way that League of Legends is played, I don't think has changed in a really long time. And I also and like obviously items change, champions change, stuff like that, but like the game itself, even with the addition of grubs, with the few changes we got to drakes, the baron changes, I don't think that any of those have changed the fabric of the game that much. So like the combination of all of these things, I think, is why you're still seeing a lot of things that were even at Worlds. And I think like it is cool to be on live patch and players actually, I'm not going to say took more risks, because I don't think that's the way to put it, but like we did see at the very least a recognition of like what few things had changed that were so broken, like the Karma, for example, who had she had 100% presence across the weekend. But yeah, I don't know if that'll be my like lukewarm take for this week, because I don't feel like it. I feel like that's even a cold take in terms of the idea that League of Legends, as a game that is played, has not really changed all that much.
All we are is dust in the wind, dude.
Outside of small things kind of rotating around it, like itemization and champion choice and stuff like that.
The fundamentals of the game are the same. You still have a creep wave every 30 seconds. You still have all these things. I do think the framework for talking about the game has actually changed the most for a while, and that's because you just, okay, we're not gonna talk about the 7:30, the 6:30 look at the wave into the recall bot and rotate for Rift Herald. Like, we're not gonna talk about that framework anymore. But other than that, it has not made massive fundamental changes. For me, though, I actually thought this patch would be way more impactful. There's a lot of champions that are unpicked, and that's what we're going to talk about a bit later, that I think definitely need to be out, but it's just that pros are always going to be really, really slow to react to these things. And you believe it or not, like 4 days of scrims is not a lot, especially if you're doing... like 2 days, the way that Mithy talked about it on the broadcast, which is 2 days of trying stuff, 2 days of focusing on what you're going to play for the day. That's only 2 days of trying patch stuff. That's also very typical for teams. It's not like a C9 specific team. I don't think I've talked to a single coach that doesn't do it that way in LCS, even before the live patch situation. So we're definitely going to see very slow changes, and we probably won't see new stuff come out until like week 2 of a new patch, but that was normal cycle before anyway. So yeah, I was hoping Emily would say, oh, it was so crazy, we had like the Karma ban and the Vayne mid, even though the Vayne mid had nothing to do with the patch, but it was so wild, you know. And I was hoping we could get that. So I'll say it. It was so crazy, guys. Oh my gosh, new patch is the best. Yeah.
I do think it's fun playing on live patch. I also, the way you said that reminded me of something T said in the pros episode, which is essentially like, we approached the patch like we targeted specific things to address. Like, so it's like, how are we going to approach the changes in this patch, narrow it down to a few things to try to work around, because you do have such a short amount of time, which also made a lot of sense to me. I'm torn between saying because I know we're going to transition into this next, so maybe this can be the segue, but like, I'm torn between saying like, oh, it was this patch specifically, or oh, there are champions that already should have been played more. That still should be played more on this patch. Like, so that is another thing where I'm like undecided as to whether it's patch specific or even just holdovers from like 14.1 that we still haven't picked up.
So we can let that be that transition, because conveniently I figured that would be the transition. So yeah, what are your, as you're coughing, I'm directing a question at you. You know, that's how this works. What are your champs that you wish people would play more?
I think MF is a big one. We saw that in Prince played it in LPL. I think a lot of the reason why I highlight MF is just because she can be so good. Like if players are going to be playing like Maokai anyway, right? Like if you're going to have a lot of setup for these kinds of things, MF can be so strong. And also, whenever I think lethality, I always think of MF. Like in a lethality meta, she's just so good. And lethality is really good right now. So I don't know if it's because she's like shorter range or whatever, but I feel like people don't have a problem picking short range comps. So like that can't be it. I'm really curious as to why we haven't seen even like something like what we saw from TF in the draft this week, where like you did still have a few bans thrown out there of like, if this team is practicing it, we don't really want to deal with it, so we'll just throw that in there, which is what I assume something happened in scrims or whatever when that ban kind of popped up. So like I was surprised not even to see that, just because in a lethality meta, like she's always the first champion that comes to mind, which is why I put her on my
Bingo card, yeah.
Bingo card. Yeah. Also in the bot lane, I put Draven because I think he's such a good answer to a lot of bot laners that can be brought out right now.
Imagine thinking.
I mean, obviously we're having a Lucian problem already in terms of win rate and execution. So maybe we just outside of Callista and then as Karma are working our way up to how to play around these pushing bot lanes. But I don't know, man. I think MF should be played. I think she's good.
Yeah, she's very good, as people who watch my co-streams know, and you know the wig that exists. Which will be
It looked great.
it's fantastic. But I think there's just so many, I think is my thing. There's just so many things that could be played with the new itemization, or at least tested, that I'm expecting. Unironically, Teemo.
I'll scout ahead.
Teemo's in like one of the best spots that he's been in his entire life. Like the mask stacking is so nice. You can even build malignants on him. Like the neutral setups and control. This is something this champ is, and then people are just blinding melee tanks. Like it's so free. It's actually so free. Just pick Teemo. You think I'm trolling, but please. There's other stuff. Like I expect to see more Soraka. I think range is so OP, and whenever range is OP, pick Jinx. You can manage wave fine with Jinx. If you're basically even versus lethality champs that can one shot you. I know people are so afraid of picking this champ against Lucian, but I mean, guys, LCS Lucian, just pick Jinx.
I am kind of surprised we haven't seen Jinx actually as well, just because like it's kind of the same thing where I was surprised we didn't see as much of Felios.
Like I love me some Zyra. All coaches love Zyra, but it's weird to me that we're defaulting to Zyra when Zyra gets outranged by everyone and their mom. So it's like for me, it's just insane that the alternative long range champs aren't being picked. I am a big Soraka fan still. For me, Camille was one that I thought people would try based on the patch changes. Just because it is actually very significant to have 2 cooldowns off 2 seconds off passive, and 2 seconds increased move speed on Q, and I need to scroll 2 second. Oh, base health. Base health is disgusting. Yeah. Anytime you're buffing a champ's base health by more than 20, it's pretty gross. So I was expecting Camille to pop out with the Jax nerfs, and Camille being like an alternative to the Jax and like a lot of those matchups. So I'm actually so surprised by the complete and utter lack of diversity in champ picks that we're seeing, when I feel like there's so much broken stuff that's being outplayed in pro. So that's my little rant soapbox. Pick Teemo. The end. But we have to broach the topic, otherwise it will just be spammed in my chat effectively. Basically, we do have to talk about champion attractiveness and tier list, because
Apparently.
this gets brought up in my chat unendingly. I have a very nice diplomatic answer. For those who are uninitiated, people like us to talk about the logistics of relations with non-humanoid champs. And, you know, since this was...
It's literally just one person in your chat. Because I made
it's becoming a wave.
That humanity will essentially have sex with anything.
Yeah, it's true. So
I also barely remember making this joke, but when Miracu brought it up again, I was like, yeah, I pretty much stand by that. What is it, like, people joke about, like Rule 34 or something?
Yeah, Rule 34.
Is that what the joke is? Yeah.
If it does exist, there will be porn about it or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, instead of my diplomatic answer is that none of the champions except for Evelyn have ever indicated that they want me to objectify them. So it's basically just Evelyn, and that's the end.
Yeah.
There we go. We settled the topic.
Yeah. Wow. This is why people watch Making the Rounds, for this content.
We're competing directly with Ovally. It's never going to succeed, but you know.
I don't think you can.
You can't. It's impossible.
She handed me a manga, and me and Captain Flowers read the description of that thing. We were both just like, "What the fuck is going on?"
But yeah, now that we've gotten that out of the way, why is Lucian still winless in LCS on the other end as the Lucian's first win proponent with the bingo card?
Yeah, I was really rooting for it to happen. And then I saw TL pick it into Karma, which interesting choice. I think I went on a rant about this at the beginning of in waiting room yesterday, but obviously no one watches that because everyone watches LEC instead. Lucian, I think people attribute it solely to a skill issue, when I think it is if you have a bot lane that is a Lucian Nami or a Lucian Milio, which by the way, as a random aside, Milio, another champion I think is really strong that for some reason doesn't have a super high presence in the LCS. Not that he hasn't been picked or banned, but that the presence rate itself is a bit surprising to me, given how strong he can be. But I think with these kind of bot lanes, if you look at how, for example, that's not a good example. I was thinking like, because basically if you have a bot lane like this, it goes for Kalista as well. But I think the way that Kalista plays, she can play differently in team fights, and she has very easy objective control that a lot of people like in mid to late, and they find easier to play around. Whereas Lucian requires different positioning in team fights and is known to fall off a bit harder. I think the big thing when you have a bot lane that you want to slam, and that means a Draven, that means a Kalista, that means a Lucian, you need to play around it, and you need to make the most of that kind of 2v2, right? And I think that's what a lot of NA, and like if you expand, LEC has also had a similar issue playing around Lucian in a lot of cases. I see teams lock this in and then not slam bot like they should. And that is my main issue with the way that people play around Lucian. And it's a very similar issue to when Kate Lux was super popular. and people kept slamming Kate Lux and then not playing around it. And like the way you'd play around that lane is a bit similar, and where you'd want to with Kate Lux, it's more about push. With Lucian Nami, I'd argue that you also have added kill pressure as well, but like you should have Drake control. You should have bot side control. You should be able to chew through that bot turret pretty quickly comparatively. And then you should be able to spread that influence around the rest of the map. Put the Lucian mid, for example, right? And he should be able to blow up a lot of his opponents if they step out of line. So like it is about the influence it brings and the way that teams play around it that I think they get wrong. And additionally, when you are picking Lucian, you should make sure that your opponents cannot immediately counter with a lane that just pushes and kind of eradicates or makes that having that pressure a lot more difficult. Because like obviously a lot of people are going to point out individual mistakes when they look at, for example, the TL FlyQuest game. But also it's just like pretty easy for the Ez Karma to push back. Like they push. Not only is Karma just super strong, but like she is a champ that you was as Karma was also locked into like against Caitlyn Lux lanes for the same reason, right? Like you stop the push, you can counter and even take control of the bot side yourself. So some of it ends up being draft 2v2, but then some of it is just execution. And then some of it is just the way that teams approach early game. Sorry, I'm speaking so slowly. I am using the excuse that I'm sick. I feel like it took 5 years for me to say that. But like if you look at BLG, for example, a team that I think kind of loses their minds in the mid game, so maybe don't look at that part, but their early games are really good. They have a very clear understanding of like, if we are locking this in, this is how we want to play around it. We saw that from FlyQuest a bit in the against TL Lucian, and we also saw that in a way from FlyQuest, but also from NRG in the game that NRG just snowballed into oblivion yesterday. And I think if you're going to be looking at a lot of these bot lanes, you really, really need to have a clear understanding of how they play, how they should be played around, and how you should approach your early game to make sure they succeed.
I think actually my problem with the Lucian, which by the way, welcome veteran viewers, we are timing it perfectly because we're going to talk about Lucian now and KCorp next, which are both topics that I know EU fans care about. So good times. The main thing for me on the Lucian is actually how they're playing mid game and how they're playing fights generally, because even when Lucians don't get ridiculously snowballed, like you can watch Ruler's Lucian and how he's been playing. A lot of the times the way that you're executing your combo is you're using R to poke someone down. As soon as someone gets down, you see down low HP, you see the angle to basically initiate with E passive autos, and then full combo, and your burst potential is absolutely insane. So you have to have the mindset of playing the champion more like an assassin. And I feel like a lot of times you watch at least your LCS Lucians, and what they're doing is they're like using R when it's up, and then if someone walks up, like maybe we get a combo, or walks out of position, maybe we get a combo or something like that. They're keeping like too much range or too much distance, and they're not using E as aggressively. So for me, it's like it feels like the champ gets more outscaled if you're not willing to go for those moments. Or like I remember when we had Unforgiven in the scrim room, the most common thing he said was "I'm flanking," unironically, and he would be playing like Aphelios, and he would just come in from the side, use the ult, and then someone would die instantly. So we need the "I'm flanking" mentality in LCS and LEC for the Lucian to succeed. And of course, like his Lucian was good. So yeah. So that's the Lucian topic. KCorp. What do we think about the KCorp situation, Emily? They're on a win streak, guys. They're undefeated in week 4.
It's the we're already eliminated buff.
True. Actually, that is a thing. Because it's the same thing as playing on live patch, unironically, because there's no pressure. You just play the game, and it's like you're playing scrims or you're playing solo queue, and it's chill and you win. So that's it's a thing at Worlds. It's a real thing. We love it.
Also, I mean, I think snowballing losses is also a thing. I don't think this is entirely the source of KCorp's issues, but in terms of stacking losses, you're going to feel infinitely more pressure to win the next time in a way that like makes a lot of individual mistakes or like really specific breakpoints in a game seem so much worse. But I don't know if you want to I feel like so many people have done like an overall KCorp diagnosis in terms of like what is wrong with this team. I will say that I did end up liking a lot of their drafts even before they were winning. And I think people have already pointed out like a pretty distinct lack of coordination. I think you, Kelsey, did you go into this on one of your streams? I feel like on one of your LPL streams, you talked about Bo just generally
and they're not
as a
undefeated.
player.
It's last 2 days. But yeah, Bo is a player. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just correcting myself. And you can relate to that because, you know, you walk yourself in circles. But yes, I did talk about Bo on the stream. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like, because I feel like he was, I guess, super, super hyped as a player. And then like, denigrated as he didn't perform to those expectations, and those expectations may have been really hyper focused on like a very small sample size. I don't know if that's what you said, but that's what I kind of feel in terms of Bo's debut and the circumstances around it back in FPX. For KCorp overall, I'm very curious to see what they do in the very small off season, because they have less than a month.
Yep. Before the next season starts. So for me, the most interesting thing to look at with this team is what happens when you're changing out when you're making like massive roster changes effectively, because you think of, even though there is no promotion relegation, you can kind of think of KCorp as a promotion relegation team. That's kind of how I think about them as, because they bought the slot from Astralis, which was on its way out, and they were a very successful EMEA team. Basically they won the EMEA summer, but they had a very like clear identity in terms of how they played, which was much more, I would say, solo lane focus. And in their wins, they have, or I didn't watch the game today, so I shouldn't say wins. I should say in the game that I watched where they won, they did play through Cabo, right? So I think for me that's a big shift in terms of how they were playing, because they were playing like way more around bot, way more around upset. When you're changing the team dynamic like super drastically, I think you're in a situation where it's not the greatest easy adaptation for the existing core that managed to stay on the team and get promoted, which was Cabo Shortsakin, right? Targavas. So those types of changes, if you're keeping like part of a core and you're expecting it to still function the same way with like very essential pieces, you can see the way that the team bombs out. Because I would say that a lot of people would say, oh, this just means that like ERL winners are not great, but that roster was like changed on almost a fundamental level. And you see this a lot historically in promotion relegation. So I think it's a very good point to hammer home that like a lot of times if you have an identity that works or succeeds, just taking pieces from it doesn't create a functional situation automatically. So yeah.
I'm asking honestly because I don't know. I'll fully admit, and I've admitted this in previous streams, that I definitely don't have a lot of time to watch ERLs. Is there a reason why they didn't promote Khaleesi just generally? And I only say this because this is not like in any way targeting upset. But like the I heard a lot of like really, really good things about him. So I was just curious if there was anything as to why that specific player didn't get promoted.
He's not minimum age. That's the biggest reason.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. For some reason, I thought he was already
because they increased the
17.
LEC minimum age to 18 for
That is why.
the sponsorships being able to open up, right? So
Okay.
he can't play.
I'm an idiot. That explains a lot.
LEC.
All right.
Which that's a whole topic. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, even if it does end up hurting this particular player, but it is definitely Khaleesi's waiting room angle. So the big player that we're talking about, them changing over, is Chinkroff and the function there. A lot of analysis has been done on the KCorp comms, so I won't get into it. I think a lot of our current viewers came from the veteran stream, so he probably has done a lot more detailed stuff. So
He'll
shout
cover it.
out to veteran on that. But for me, like the TLDR it's very interesting to see like the way these teams function, their cores get changed, and then watch them completely bomb out of the next league up. So I'm very curious to watch the game if they want to get today, because again, I co-stream LPL and then I sleep through LEC generally and watch VODs. So I think if they keep the same like formula for winning games, then that will tell me a lot that the way that they used to play is probably like more comfortable, more familiar for Kabashard and Sakin, and we'll see how it goes for them in the coming months.
Right?
Yes, true Grim Bleeper. Sajed versus Khaleesi at Worlds when no one knows. Okay, it's very it's gonna happen soon. Okay, so that is the KCorp topic. Thanks everyone for hanging out and listening to that one. I think we can move on and we can talk a little bit more about some of the hot LCS topics. For me, the big one is Team Liquid, because I think the prevailing opinion of how well Team Liquid will do versus their current form is the one that is the most disparate in standings, if that makes sense. So like what people projected TL to be versus where they are and how they look.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I already covered TL's draft points earlier. I think in terms of the way this team, like, because last year this team had such a difficult time translating what was legitimately a very explosive early game to wins, right? Like that was the huge meme about Team Liquid, is that this team is super explosive early. They play around bot, they slam bot, they look good going into mid game, and then they just like slowly whittle away their advantages through like not great plays. And obviously with the roster changes that they made, it would make a lot of sense to me to still kind of play through bot, right? Because you have someone coming in Impact who is not only just really experienced, but is typically going to play things that just don't need a lot of attention. And he himself, I think, is a top laner that you kind of look at as someone to do like actually soak pressure pretty well and do fine, and then be able to enter mid game with something that ends up helping the team out. And then I was expecting to go bot a lot more frequently. and I was kind of surprised. Our stats aren't properly updated for proximity, so I tried to pull this before the show and I couldn't because we had a game not upload essentially on the back end, so we have to redo it. But I was surprised going into the FlyQuest game that he actually had the highest top proximity of any jungler, just because, again, I think this Team Liquid team functions really well when they play through bot lane and then spread that influence around. And I have not necessarily seen that out of them this year, which is an interesting shift, especially given the roster changes that they made. So, like, if someone's asking me what I think TL should do, I would like to see them play through bot more.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely something that we can point out. My other thing is, and I've said this from the beginning, and this is why I had them really low in my initial power rankings from compared to a lot of people, is just for whatever reason, TL has hired basically 10 players who are very good at playing around other players. And so I'm including their challengers team in this as well. Like, it has kind of the same issue, and why their challengers team is also currently winless, unfortunately. So I think that that's something that we can call out, is that there's not like a clear focal point, in my opinion, in any team. I think Yon, to your credit, like Yon core, their laning has been pretty decent. I actually think Yon might be the better laner on paper than core, even though a lot of times spotlights are led by 2v2. But for me, the biggest thing that's like so strange about this team is how hard people are focusing on APA and Yon when there are mistakes across the board. Impact, like, he even acknowledged this in the interview post game. He really messed up his top matchup, and everyone's like, "Oh, Impact's so funny." It's like, please fire Yon and APA. When I've seen a lot of weird, I would say uncharacteristic plays from Impact, most especially because I would think Impact's best plays are usually like his TP flanks and surprising people with those types of things. And I've seen just him execute a lot of TPs that do nothing or end up wasting his time. And that either indicates that there's like a really poor communication structure about what's going to do. People don't necessarily understand the direction or what he's intending with these TPs, or he's not getting good information from looking at the minimap. So that's one. Their lane assignments have been very strange as well, and they've had to like double TP and lose all map pressure to correct those. There's just a lot of structural problems on TL, and as well as like a lot of misexecutions and skirmishes from everyone, like Umti. I'm thinking about the Rel game. Just like a lot of really weird bits, but it's like, oh, we need to fire APA and Yon. And so for me, that's like, I hate that being the narrative. So anytime I can kind of shake the trees, I will on that one.
Yeah, I just think for me, in terms of providing a really easy to execute framework, I just wouldn't mind if they went, again, kind of like what their composition was against Immortals, even though I actually really liked what Immortals had for an answer in this specific game. So maybe it's not the best example, even though Immortals obviously lost. But some sort of team fighting composition around bot and just keep it as simple as possible. I think would help them out a lot. And again, like Yon was one of those players that I was surprised just wasn't slamming Aphelios immediately in week 1. I'm about to look really stupid because maybe it was banned against him both times, but I don't think it was.
I don't think it was, but
no game 1, and I'm checking back in week 1. It was banned against him by Shopify, but not in their first game. Okay. Yeah, just because he is such an Aphelios enthusiast, and I feel like he is really confident on that champion. And again, like in terms of the players that they did bring onto this roster and who they kept, I would like to see that kind of return to form of just focusing on playing through bot lane and keeping it very simple, because when they looked their best, I think that was how they played.
Yeah, I think that, and also like Aphelios isn't. Aphelios was definitely like the permaban against CL. We would ban his Aphelios a lot because it is just a very strong champ for him. The Aphelios is in such a weird spot to me though, because range is so OP once again, and
Yeah.
I bring this up a lot, but I think one thing is that goes unmentioned is Gale Force not being a thing makes it very difficult to reposition. So if you have range advantage, and also like early spring, range is always OP because no one is setting up for neutrals in advance, getting good flank angles off. Like no one is coordinated enough to do that shit. So just stand on mid, hit them with your gun that is longer range than their gun, win the game. It's very basic. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely, so Aphelios to me is in a weird spot. I know a lot of pros like Aphelios and Ezreal, so I actually expect we'll see that one more. But into Karma, as Aphelios hates his life for sure. And the reason why people like Aphelios into Ezreal is not even something I agree with. It's like, use purple gun, snare, burst Ezreal, which in theory, yeah, works, but you have to like play on a very specific circumstance, and the Ezreal kind of has to be bad. But a lot of pros do like it, so we will let it go. The other one that I think people really want us to talk about is Shopify winning versus C9, because that was like basically the big upset, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your thoughts on that one.
So this one, I need to go back and VOD review, because I actually got pulled to do, because now that we're trying to film more stuff in between, I sadly got pulled to do content during the first part. I went back and essentially looked at the dive bot, and there was that, and then I think there was I mean that is kind of where it all started, because again, this was the game I was thinking of where I was like, oh, this is earlier in this show I was thinking, oh shit, I should use the example of how Cloud9 play around bot, but then this dive went horrifically wrong. So it's like, maybe that is not the example I use. This is also, I think, a case of Melio working overtime, specifically in that instance. But in terms of overall, I really need to VOD review this game. I actually loved, I will say this, unironically, I loved the Vayne pick into the Scion. Obviously, it got to the point in this game where it didn't matter, because they were not able to snowball the Kalista Renata lane. Which is, again, if you're looking at this composition and then you look at that bot lane dive, that's kind of where this game goes wrong for me. Because, not to say that like one play and it's over, because I don't agree with that about a lot of games. But in this specific setup, you really, really want to snowball this Kalista, right? Because ideally, again, if she is able to take over the bot side of the map, you have really, really strong control. Jojo is in a hard like counter pick matchup that you're trusting him to be able to pilot. And the fact that the Kalista lane did not get off the ground like they wanted to was a huge, huge factor in this game. I know a lot of people were also harping on the Aatrox, but I have not had time to go back and look at like Fudge's lane or what happened on top side. So I don't know if, again, because I missed like half this game and I haven't had time to VOD review it, so I'm sorry.
I think for me, the biggest thing that game was more or less the reason why it was so punishing for the play to go wrong was the lack of wave clear. So it was very difficult to stall out the game. I think a big issue that I had with it was just I hate Callista, and the Callista was picked early, which is why you're put into that situation. So you have Callista, Renata, and then we went Maokai. So we had no front line to take space. So it did a lot of the fights were very comical, with JoJo basically going in first, as he is wont to do. But who is gonna go in first, right? Like Maokai goes in first. Vulcan looked really ridiculous in that game, and I don't even think he was playing that bad, despite the fact that range champions aren't his best. Because it's like, what are you gonna do, right? Your only engage is Callista throwing you into the middle of the fight, and basically at that point you immediately get blown up. Maokai gets blown up, so JoJo is just running forward and dying instantly. Vulcan is just running forward and dying instantly. So that was like kind of the reason why it was like very hard to come back in that game. For me though, I think the way you'd want to play the game is you immediately get the lockdown on the Lilia, you kill the Lilia, and then Vayne can do whatever. Like the biggest threat to Vayne is the Lilia 100%. I think it wasn't over in the bot dive. It was over kind of in the dragon fight that they shouldn't have taken after. That was my biggest thing, because I think the game is still winnable from that perspective. It's hard, but it's just very difficult, and that you have to get like the perfect engage scenario, and Lilia has to die. And you're just getting pushed into your base, so you don't have the wave clear to keep up with it, and then JoJo defaults to his I'm gonna split push top. Well, you guys got this, right? You can defend our dying inhib while pushing top T2 on the other side of the map, right? So yeah, it was a tricky one. But I liked it in practice. It's just the moment you fall behind because of those situations, it's hard.
Yeah.
So for me, the AD early pick Callista was a bigger problem than anything else in the draft. And the builds were also an issue. So
I feel like I am bringing nothing to this episode.
That is not true.
People are gonna be like, "What is wrong with Emily? Her brain's not working today."
Okay, we're just gonna cover your entire screen with frogs in the post edit.
No.
Okay. It's okay. We could have rescheduled, to be honest, but this week is so weird for me, honestly. And it was like, no,
we
consistently,
need to get the content
we
out.
got it. The content has to be made. The show must go on. I
am actually terrible about that. Like I used to, not anymore, but I used to always be the person who would just like show up to work like deathly ill because I'm living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford not to. And also don't do well if I'm not doing work.
In years in the future, like 20 years in the future, LCS production has been shut down. We have everyone else is left, but it's just Emily and a camera trying to torture her friends into playing League of Legends.
That sounds absolutely miserable.
Must go on. The LCS will never die. Emily Rand single-handedly saving the scene right now. It will happen, I believe. Do you have any specific lukewarm takes for us today?
What was my lukewarm take earlier was that League hasn't changed fundamentally as a game. Do I have any other lukewarm takes? Let me look at I think I have one. I feel like this is a very lukewarm, if not like actual cool take though. I think, and I could be easily proven wrong because they play each other this week. I think Dom1 is better than HLE, or D plus Kia is better than HLE. And they play each other. And the reason I'm saying this is because D plus is actually below them in the standings, but I actually think they're a better and more cohesive team. Right now, Showmaker has shown this kind of return to form. Lucid's been performing pretty well. So yeah, I don't know. I know this HLE team is a super team, but I feel like D plus can take them this week.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is try to teach you how to make that take an actual hot take. So What
Is this part of the thing?
I don't know if
Is
it
this
is.
what your chat
but I'm-
told me to do?
but
Or
I'm
told you to do?
But I'm adding it now. You know, I'm gonna help you out here. So
Okay.
we can go a couple of ways with this, right? How hard is Damn One Kia going to stop HLE? So that's step one. Step two is there a player, you know, on this team that you think is just like objectively way better than their counterpart? That might be somewhat controversial.
Oh, I was gonna say I think Showmaker is significantly better
Yeah,
than
I don't
Zeka,
think
but I
that's
feel like that's not
okay.
controversial at all.
We're getting colder here. we're not warming up the take. Go
I know.
back. Go back.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say aiming is better than Viper.
I was hoping we could get something like that and clip it and put it on
Yeah,
Twitter.
I wouldn't
you know?
say. I definitely wouldn't say Kellen is better than Delight. Lucid better than Peanut. I feel like people would argue out because Peanut has this kind of status of like he is a shot caller. He's very vocal. Doran versus Kingen. I feel like people will just say that's a wash anyway, given the way people think of both those players.
I think we can work with Lucid.
So yeah, I'm really bad at hot takes here. I guess the hottest take of all of them would be probably Lucid better than Peanut. Although like I don't know, Peanut has a weird like backlash culture around him as well. So
well, okay.
or like actually the hottest take would be that aiming is better than Viper, but I don't believe that whatsoever.
Okay, well, let's go back on the Lucid versus Peanut. I think this one is shoppable. Okay, very workshoppable. we can work with this one. What about Lucid is better than Peanut?
I think his thus far from what I've seen from Lucid, and again I didn't have time to watch his challengers career, but in terms of the way he's performed thus far for D+, I think his team fighting has actually been really good, like with the rest of the team, which is very cool because a lot of the times if a jungler comes up who is coming up from LCK challengers, a lot of the times the things they will actually have to work on is team fighting, because it's more about like hands diff a lot of the time in challengers, where everyone kind of like LCK challengers is essentially what people think the LPL is. Not that the LPL isn't still like more faster paced a lot of the time, but like LCK challengers can be that kind of thing where players just run at each other. So I would say the thing that's impressed me the most about Lucid is his overall team fighting, especially since he's Challengers player.
Okay, so
or not anymore, but he was just a Challengers player.
So usually when we talk about team fights, what's very important is mechanics. Okay, and I think most people would argue that Peanut is a mechanically exceptional player. So what I want you to say is that Lucid just completely mechanically outclasses and dumpsters Peanut in every way. I need to hear it from you, Emily. It needs to happen.
This pains me to say this. All right, is this what the Lukewarm takes is going to be? We're just going to workshop them into hot takes. All right.
I feel like at this
Lucid
we'll
is going to
yeah.
fucking dumpster Peanut. There we go.
Nice. Mechanically outclass him in every way.
It's going to murder him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're working on it. We're getting here.
We'll see if that happens. Now, like HLE are gonna 2-0. I've just cursed the entire thing.
This is the fun of the hot takes. This is why they're hot. You know. Okay.
It'll be hilarious.
We're figuring it out.
Episode,
we're learning it.
Actually, where's it'll be hilarious if this episode comes out after they play, and they just lose.
Yeah, I'll see.
That would be the most hilarious outcome.
I'm gonna look at the schedule because I don't know when they play.
They play on Friday. They play later.
No. Yeah,
they have a late game, so like it's gonna have to come out before then.
They play Friday. That's definitely doable. I could definitely do it. That's easy for me. All right, we're good. Okay. Well, before we wrap, since we're already at the hour mark. Curious if you have any highlight games that you wanna bring up from this week, or that you think people should watch?
I think last week we had 1 day of LPL, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had the BLG TES series in that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think BLG's early games have been really interesting. So like watching them is just pretty interesting. Maybe don't look at some of the mid game things that they do, but like they're in terms of if you want to see a team that usually enters with like very clear early game plan, I think BLG has been really interesting to watch. From this past week, I really enjoyed the DK Gen G series over in LCK. I think that was like my favorite match I watched this past week. Obviously, I feel like everyone's gonna say the telecom war as well, so maybe we can add that in there. Although, in my opinion, it was like pretty one-sided. The game that they won was like a barrel Alistar performance that is actually very fun to watch. So if you're a KT fan, maybe don't watch the next 2 games, but because T1 kind of rolled over them in those. But I think by far and away my favorite series from this past week was the Gen G, in either region, in either Eastern region, was the Gen G DK one.
So it's time
So go back and watch that.
So it's time for my completely degenerate recommendation.
Is this gonna be from Challengers?
No, but
okay, I was gonna say it's NACL.
Arguably worse. Arguably worse. LGD Ultra Prime. If you want.
Okay. Unironically though, LGD have had some like interesting moments. I'll give you that.
Okay.
They actually make me like want to watch them, which is not something I can say of every LGD team that has existed.
It's none of that, okay? I think I lost years of my life watching this series. This is the most degenerate gameplay. If anyone ever says that like bottom, like 17th place LPL would win LCS ever again, just watch that series. It is absolutely fantastic.
Hey, they had some interesting plays.
I mean,
in this series and in the NIP one. In the NIP one, I actually thought they might be able to like muscle a game out of them, but NIP had better hands.
There was this sequence where the UP Twitter took a clip of from their game and then just posted dog barking noises.
Wait, that's so good.
That was the game. It's like barnyard fun right here, and it went to full 3 games. Also, if anyone ever flames a collie being picked into Corky, that is also the series to send them. There were some very fun clips, and my chat became big fans of Hai Chow because that guy looks for the deepest flanks. That guy, he's going to walk all the way to his own base. He's gonna do a full lap before he gets the perfect flank angle.
My God.
Go behind enemy lines so far. It's fantastic. So anyway, if you're a degenerate like me, watch LGD UP. In terms of other degenerate predictions, I think for LEC, because I always end up picking the LEC ones. I mean, everyone's just gonna watch the KCorp games anyway.
Yeah,
but I did like the picks in the Mad Lions one that we were just watching. So if you haven't seen that one yet, it's a good shout. I think the Fnatic G2 is always like a great series to watch, or a great game to watch whenever they play. And there's just like so much storytelling that goes into that rivalry at this point that you always have to recommend it. So that's where I am on LEC.
that one was pretty fun too. That was the Vladimir game.
Yep. So yeah, and again, that's why I said degenerate predicts. We prefaced the degenerate picks for the week. LCS, as fun as it was to watch Shopify beat C9, I don't actually think the game was that fun to watch. Let me think. What would I recommend from LCS this week? Oh, Energy versus 100 was legitimately entertaining, I thought. Like there were actually a lot of points where I thought 100 could win. And I love watching both River and Contracts. They're two of my favorite junglers to watch because it's like I always say on stream that Contracts is the jungler that you want on your team when you are fucking up drafts because he'll save the game for you. If you draft like 3 losing lanes, he'll find some creative fun shit to do. And River is very similar, and we actually saw him do that in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, very fun game to watch. So that's kind of my pick for the week.
That was a fun game.
Any other ones that you want to shout out?
I mean, it was an absolute bloodbath, but if you want to see Ivern, also just the way they played around bot lane, I would actually also recommend the NRG Fly. It's one of those things where I hesitate a bit to recommend it because it is really stompy. So like, it's not a game. It is a game where it is decided like pretty early on. But one thing I really appreciate about NRG specifically, and occasionally they have games like this where they just have a good understanding, like you already talked about Contracts, but a good understanding of like how to respond to what your opponent is doing. And not only be able to counteract that, but turn it into advantages for yourself and then play around those advantages. I thought NRG did that really, really well against FlyQuest in this game. And I also think that a lot of times we also see NRG sometimes biff their mid game a bit. Like either they get too hyphy or their setups are a little bit, can be a little bit wonky. But I like when you can see a good like snowbally game out of them. And if you're wondering like how this team won LCS, it is because they are a team that can approach having some pretty not only creative game plans, but also when they are on, it is just very fun to watch them be able to like close out a game and recognize their advantages.
Yeah, so basically just watch the energy games this week. TLDR. Anyway. Also, I love Ivern.
I'm trying to think if there was another LEC game that I really like.
Unfortunately, we are probably like the worst at covering LEC because I sleep through it. So
I have to VOD review most of it
so
because
most of it,
a lot
I
of
do
it
VOD
overlaps with like our prep. I remember Fnatic G2 though because I did like that one. Let's see. I need to watch the Mad one that just happened. I really like this Mad team. Oh, it might tilt the fuck out of you. Speaking of DGen games, but we finally saw, because I had already highlighted Merwin as someone who might pick something weird. Varus top.
Yep, Varus top is fun.
Yeah, with the Ivern jungle from Elioya. This is gonna tilt Fnatic fans into oblivion because there were several times where Fnatic probably should have just won this game. However, if you want to see and you haven't already seen it, because I think it was posted to Reddit and I know I saw people tweeting it, but there is a Varus 1v1 that is like very entertaining in this game. And yeah, I mean, I just also really like this Mad team. If you're looking at an example of a team that we were talking about, Carmine Cora, and how they changed out a few players and it could have affected not only pre-existing synergy, but just like how you want to play the game. In terms of what players on that team and how they want to play the game. This Mad Lions Koi lineup seems to have they seem to be working as like a pretty cohesive unit, and they are relying on pre-existing synergy obviously for that. And it's just really cool to see their success over the split. This isn't the best game at demonstrating it, maybe, but I thought the Vars top was fun, so I'll call out that game too. Just because I really like this Mad Lions team, and I don't know, Vars top, why not? You know, maybe he'll pull out something equally weird next week.
Well, I do like the Vars top. I was actually waiting for someone to pick it because it has been such a thing in Korean solo queue for so long. Solo queue generally. So I was waiting for it to be picked. So yeah, it's a good one. Any teasers for LCS this week before we go? Because we always got to get
It's
the
a
leaks.
super week.
Yeah,
It's a super week, so it starts on Friday. I don't know if I'll be casting or not, actually.
mysterious.
So I can't tease that because I don't have talent assignments yet. But yeah, I just released, or basically, I headed up the latest episode of Pros. So if you were seeing people talk about what happened, Jat did the first episode with, I believe, Dokla, XU, and Jensen. And that was a banger. I feel like mine is less of a banger in terms of like hot takes coming out of the players, but they were all like
Very on
really,
brand.
really good.
Yeah.
The conversation was great. Their personalities were all like are really well suited to a discussion like this where they can just have time to kind of like rant and ramble about things. They talk about how they got into League. It involves a lot of saying they're studying to their parents and then going to play at PC Bongs. And it was just it was a really fun conversation to have. And it's out now on YouTube, so watch that.
Nice. All right. Well, that's it for us. I will let Emily go tend to her illness.
I'll probably sleep.
Yeah, it's a good call, and I have to run off. But thanks everyone for showing up for the live show. This will be up on YouTube within a couple days.